We really appreciate you joining us this morning for session 2 of A Parent's Guide for Virtual Learning. Just a sound check for those of you who are logged on. If you could chat with me in the chat box, locate your chat box. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. I know for those of you who are logged in by phone, you can just listen in. This session will be recorded and you will be able to access it after the session today. So if you are in, then we will go ahead and get started this morning. And all of your questions that you have, you can put them in the chat. Just a quick sound check. Okay, so you can't hear anything. All right, one moment. Let me make sure here. Okay, can you hear me now?
I, I can hear you, Dr. Davis.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we'll proceed. Again, thank you, everyone. I like to always begin with our topic for today. How do I meet my child's needs? We'll start with some meeting protocols and reminders, and then I will introduce Dr. Lee, who will have a few announcements for you today, and then we will proceed. So just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be available for review in your parent portal and other places for you. If you missed it today, you'll definitely have an opportunity to catch up. All participants have been muted for optimal sound performance. If your sound is not working, please dial in or download the Amazon Chime app. If you don't log into the app, you either have to call in for security reasons, you have to call in and view it and listen to it on your phone. So if you would locate your chat feature, because we will interact a little bit on the chat. We'll usually ask a few questions during the presentation to get some feedback. And at the end of the session today, we will put a link in there for you to provide us with some feedback from the session. So now we would like to get started. So we'll hear a word from Dr. Lee, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. Dr. Lee?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Davis, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and I hope I do not have an echo because I'm logged in with two different devices. But good morning, Dr. Davis and team, as well as our parents, our community stakeholders, our school and district staff who have joined our webinar for today. On behalf of our superintendent, Dr. Morsi Beasley, and our deputy superintendent of school leadership, Dr. Ralph Simpson, I would like to thank you for joining part 2 of our parents webinar to provide you with the support you need through this transition to at-home learning. Once again, I want to commend our parents for the efforts that they are making and they continue to make to ensure the safety and well-being of their families, and also to continue to provide support with learning through this challenging time. I know that it has been different and there's still a lot of uncertainty, but that's why we have these partnerships to be sure that we're supporting our parents. I would like to emphasize that our principals, our teachers, our student support services department, technology, we're working diligently to ensure that our families are supported and that needs are being met. And please know that we're continuing to operate in a spirit of compassion, so our students will not be penalized for the different barriers or situations that may be preventing them from fully engaging in daily digital instruction. We ask that you remain in contact with your child's teacher to share any concerns or needs that you have. I did reference during the first webinar that we shared with parents through the parent portal a letter called Phase 2 Grading and Digital Learning Expectations. That letter just outlines a reduced expectation for the amount of grades that students are expected to obtain each week, as well as the amount of work time that they should be engaging in. We wanted to ensure that we were considerate of the different situations of our students. So if you have not read that letter, please do so. And always continue to visit our Clayton County homepage for important updates. So again, parents, I thank you for joining today, and I also thank you for just continuing to partner with the school district during this time. We really have your child's needs as our first priority, and we're continuing to pray for you, pray for your families, and we just hope that out of all of this, more promising possibilities occur. So, Dr. Davis, thank you again for facilitating these sessions, and I'll turn it over to you at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Lee. As Dr. Lee, just to echo, we are hoping everyone is staying safe, and we do commend parents. And those of you who joined us either now or viewing the recording, we really understand the difficulty that this transition may cause. So what we want to do today as we move forward is really just focus on how do I meet my child's needs. As we discuss the strategies in this session today, please keep in mind that one size does not fit all. All of the strategies that we discussed in session 1, which we'll recap a little bit here in a minute, as well as the strategies that we discussed here in session 2 and moving forward, everything won't work for every child. And so you have to take the strategies and make sure that you mold them to fit your child or your children so that it works for you and your family. Just as a recap for session 1, when we were in the last session, we talked about how important it was to create rituals and routines for our students. We also talked about creating a consistent schedule, a daily schedule, a weekly plan. And we talked about implementing and monitoring your plan. And I actually was able to get some feedback from a few parents who attended the last session, and they really appreciated those tips. Some were actually, they called us after the session and talked about how they had implemented some of those strategies. So if you didn't get a chance to hear session 1, there is a link available, and we'll get that to you. We'll have it posted if you haven't seen it already, as well as this one. So from session 1, make sure that you started to create that schedule for everyone. Today, our session goals for today, we're going to talk a little bit more technical today for parents. We're going to explore 4 different learner styles. We're going to look at these learning styles, and you may say, well, why do we need to know the learning styles? Well, the best way to help yourself, your child, is to understand how that child learns. So we're going to determine what type of learning style your child is. And then we're going to select 3 strategies for you to implement and develop positive rules for learning at home. These are our goals for today. And with the sessions go by pretty quickly. And so we don't want to give you too much to overwhelm you, but we want to try to give you some information to think about and consider, just something you can take away to implement in your transition, teaching your children at home. And remember, a part of this whole process is to remember that parental engagement is really an essential part of a child's academic success. We want to make sure that as parents work with students in this homeschool environment, it's critical that you continue to work with them in the same manner when we get back to our normal lives. And hopefully that will be sooner than later, because we do want everyone to stay safe. And so being a part of our child's education in this manner is really just helping us build a stronger bond, a stronger relationship between home and school. And we want to make sure that we have that mindset going into this process, or while we're in this process. And we want to keep that mindset after this process, transitions back to our regular setting. All right, so let's begin by collecting some information. And if you can, type in the chat, that's fine. If not, we'll kind of move on and talk about each of these. So as you look at your challenges with this situation, what is your main challenge with teaching your child? We understand the challenges of scheduling, and we talked about that in session 1, but what is the main challenge you see? We've been in this about a month now, and what are the main challenges you see with teaching your child? And I want you to just pick one. If you could type in the chat, pick one. What is your main challenge with teaching your child? Do you see the main challenge being more reading, more writing, math, listening, or all of the above? Or is it more of a behavioral or an interest, or is it something else? And you may have more than one, but pick the one that stands out. Or if it's all of the reading, writing, math, listening skills, you can pick all of the above. So I know I see math skills. That's always tough for me as a parent, especially as the kids get older, because you don't quite understand. And now they're teaching math a different way than what we learned, maybe. And so that is a critical one. Thank you for that response. So with your challenges, with the challenges in teaching your child, we want to give you some strategies in dealing with that. How do I best assist my child based on their strengths? And so that's what we want to kind of look at today. What are the strengths? So let's see. So let's talk about their learning style. What is a learning style? And I know for parents, this is something that teachers learn early in their careers of teaching, and it's really important. So that's why I wanted to share this with you today, because it's a thought process. How can I best help my child if I don't know their learning style? And as parents, we are their first teachers, so we see things all along since they were babies that we may not have thought about classifying it this way. So what is a learning style? Easily put, it's the way we learn best. There are 4 main learning styles that we want to share today. And so as we look at these, maybe jot something down, make a mental note, but the easiest way to remember this is if you could remember the word VARK, V-A-R-K, V-A-R-K. Visual, V stands for visual. Visual learners is one of the learning styles that we want to talk about today. Auditory learners, reading and writing learners, and kinesthetic learners. And so some of you may say, well, again, what is this? Why are we having to learn about learning styles? Because you want to make sure you have a basic understanding of how your child learns so that you can provide them with activities and environments that build upon their strengths and how they learn best. So let's look at each of these briefly. And then before today is over, you want to be able to determine which one of these most likely fits your child's learning style, because sometimes we share learning styles. So, but there is usually a dominant one, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Okay, let's start with visual learners. So, visual learners are those learners who like drawings. A lot of our kids are visual learners. I am definitely a visual learner myself. Um, Kids who like drawings, and this is for ages pre-K through grown adults. Those who like drawings, pictures, diagrams, written notes and directions versus a teacher reading. Have you ever been in a classroom or at church or in a meeting at work, and if someone gives you some direction or instructions, you hear them, but you better when you see them? So those are visual learners. Those are individuals who attach more to the information when they can see it. Think about how you learn, or if you're using your GPS on your cell phone. For those visual learners, you want to see the directions. You want to. I know for me, when I'm driving and I'm using either maps or Waze, I like to go in and look at the directions as I'm driving, or as before I plan my trip. I like to read the directions so I can see them. Browsing the internet and learning and viewing by images. A lot of kids like to learn by looking at the pictures and the images. So if you have noticed where your child really gravitates to drawings and pictures and diagrams, maps, or boxes that they can fill in or see the pictures, they may be more of a visual learner. So, visual learning. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Auditory learners. So auditory learners are those learners who learn better when the information is enforced by sound. So nowadays, a lot of kids, they have the earbuds, they like listening to the music. So auditory learners are those learners who prefer reading out loud. Uh, Reading aloud, they prefer audiobooks, listening to books, they prefer listening to the words of direction. So contrary to the visual learner, they like to hear the directions. So back to that same example, if I were driving in my car and I prefer for the GPS to speak to me and tell me which way to go, and I can visualize it in my mind through the words that I'm hearing, then that person is more of an auditory learner. This learner likes to listen to the words and directions. They like to listen to lectures, or they learn by song. They are musically smart. A lot of people make connections by the sound of what's coming to them. And so if you learn this way, or you notice that your kid does better when you say something versus give them something to look at, they may be an auditory learner. Then we're going to go to our reading and writing learners. These are learners who prefer written expressions, reading words, journal writing. These are more, if you have even the kids who like to write raps or write songs, even though they like to sing them, but if they like really writing, so a lot of kids like to write scripts and plays, and these are your reading and writing learners, those who prefer to really engage with the words on the page. These kids will be more of your browsing the internet kids and reading the information. So you'll have some who like to browse and just look at pictures, but you'll have some others who like to browse and read the internet, read the words, get the information. So they may see a picture, but they may look for the caption. They may go straight to the caption because they want to learn more about the picture through words. And so these are our reading and writing learners. Lastly, you have your kinesthetic learner. These are learners who learn by doing, exploring. They want to touch it's, and you see that handprint there, just as, to make it simple. These learners are those who want to have their hands on the process. They want to investigate. They like role playing and acting, moving around, dancing, action. They want action. So a lot of times when we tell kids, go sit down and do your work, go sit down and be still, sit down and, it's that's just not how they learn best. So that might not be their strength. That may not be the way that they're going to receive that information. I was in a classroom once, and I was working with a teacher, and the teacher kept telling the young student to sit down, sit down. And so I asked the student, I said, come to the front of the room with me and write on the board and share the answer. It was a math class. It was a 6th grade math class. Now, while the student didn't want to sit down and complete the assignment, he knew all the answers. He could come to the board. He could write the answers on the board. He knew all of the information, but he just did not want to sit down and read the information on the paper. He wanted to participate by being more engaged. And so if your students are exhibiting those types of behaviors at home where they want to get more involved in the work, then we have to figure out ways to create activities for them to allow them to do more exploring inside of the assignment. And so making sure that we understand that if our learners are more kinesthetic, then we want to help them by giving them that experience for the learning. And if you understand which of these learning styles work better for your child, then you can adapt your home situation to provide the better experience for your kid. And like I said, you may say, well, I see all of these in my kid, but there's usually a dominant one that we can pinpoint. And so let's do a quick self-check. What kind of learner are you as a parent? Do we understand our own learning styles? And again, you may share more than one quality, but most of us have a dominant learning style. So just for a moment, take a moment and examine yourself. Think about your own experiences as an adult and select your most dominant style. Would you say you were more of a visual learner, an auditory learner, reading and writing learner, or a kinesthetic learner? If you would if you're on the computer and you can chat that, by all means, drop it in the chat and let's see what we have here. If for those of you who are joining us by phone, if you could just kind of say to yourself which one you think it is, and then we'll kind of look at that. Definitely visual and reading. Yes, I share those same. Visual, I'm definitely more of the visual learner. And I also like to write and read, but visual helps me learn most. And so let's look at this. I'm going to take this link here and I'm going to paste it in the chat for you. And again, if you're joining by phone, you can view this a little later, but I'm going to copy this link and I'm going to paste it here in the chat box. This is a 20 question, and I'll pull it up here for those of you viewing now, just so you can see. This is a learning style inventory. So if you answer these 20 questions, and you can do it with yourself and you can do it with your kid this weekend, take some time while we're sheltered in and go through these questions with your student and with your self to identify what your learning style would be. This is a good one. And then I have another one here. And this is a learning style assessment. And I'm going to also post this one in the chat for you. so that you can have access to these, so that this weekend when you're home with the kids, you can begin to understand what that learning style is. Okay? And so most of us have identified ourselves as visual learners, which a lot of kids are visual in learning. That's why we say don't sit and talk to a kid all day. Give them, give them experience, let them feel, touch, see it, so that they can learn that information. But now let's see, have we thought about, now that we've kind of looked at what these different styles are, what kind of learner is our child? So let's think about it. Again, if they are visual, they learn by seeing. They like charts, graphs, graphic organizers, which if you don't know exactly what that might look like, you can just Google the word graphic organizers and you'll see so many of them. But basically, they're little different kind of maps to help kids organize information. A lot of teachers use these. I use them with my kids at home. We do a lot of graphic organizing, even the schedule, even the daily schedule. We do a lot of organizing on graphic organizers. If you just print out a map of, a calendar of the week, so that the student can see the calendar and understand what happens every day on that calendar. Those visual learners will really gravitate to that. Lesson outlines. If they have to do a writing assignment, they want to create an outline so that they can see the big picture of exactly what they're going to do for that lesson. So, for example, if I'm teaching a lesson or if I'm working with my child on, let's just say they were learning about birds and in science, and I needed to show them, what I would do is go find pictures of birds, and I would go outside and we would go look at the different types of birds that we can see flying by. And I would have them to identify those birds that they see outside in our yard. I would pull up pictures of birds on the internet. I would let them see these pictures and learn these pictures of birds. Or if we were talking about, if they were learning their numbers, if you have a small kid, which I know by this time of the year, they should know their numbers and they should know their letters and things like that. But just for example's sake, I would give them pictures of these letters and words, or whatever words they're learning at this point in the year. So that's a good example of visual learner. PowerPoints. The visual learner does really well with PowerPoints. And so while I don't expect for you, the parent, to create PowerPoints, but guess what? There are lots of them already created on Google. On Khan Academy, there's a lot of information. And you can also remember, you're not doing this alone. You should speak with your child's teacher to say, hey, my child seems to learn best when you provide a graphic organizer or a chart. So, and that teacher who's been with your student all year probably already knows that that is your child's strength, and should work together with you to provide exactly what is needed for your child. And so if you look again at the auditory learner, that learner or child who learns by hearing. So read alouds. I taught English. I taught high school English. And I used to love to read to my students. And those students who were auditory learners, they loved it. And so reading out loud to your child, or if there's a story, you can YouTube and see if that story is, if someone has recorded a live reading of that story or that novel. A lot of novels are on online now if you have to read with your child. And so these kids really appreciate listening centers. And so that would be really fun to create a listening center at home where you just create a corner or a space where, and let the kid create that space, whether they are pre-K or whether they are senior in high school. Create a space in the home that they like, and they can go listen to a lesson. They can, on the day that they have their live day with their teacher, they enjoy listening to the teacher. And so again, verbal instructions, repeating those instructions verbally so that kids understand the instructions. I know sometimes if you say things, the kid who really prefers to read them, the visual learner, they miss a step because they need to hear it or they need to see it. And so understanding which of these is my child's strength will help you help your child. This one I really love and think is really important. Very undervalued in our homes, discussions. It is so important that we have discussions with our children, and the discussions can be about the schoolwork, it can be about the lesson, it can be about the news, or a movie. Even if you sit down and have family time and you all discuss the movie. So as a teacher, I used to let my kids watch a movie, and then we would talk about the plot of the movie. We would talk about some of the things that happen, which is the plot, the events in the story. But having these discussions and then having them to express, well, how did you feel about that character? And what did you see about that character in the movie or on TV if you were watching a show? You can have simple discussions that really enhance the student doesn't even know that they're learning by hearing at this point, but having these discussions about different things it's a very important skill, and it will help to increase the students' performance in their schoolwork just by having various discussions, with you at home. And then here's one that even if the discussion isn't with you, they can have a discussion with their friends. Repeat to a friend, go and talk about your schoolwork with your friend. I know now that our kids are home, they spend a lot of time talking with their friends on FaceTime about the work. And usually I'm personally not a big proponent of the kids being on their phone, but now that we're in quarantine, it's really important for them to have that interaction, especially if they are an auditory learner. I mean, they want to hear someone, they want to speak to someone. And so if you have that ability at home to allow them to FaceTime or talk with a kid, a friend, a classmate, or even another family member to share what happened at school with their work today. All of these types of discussions are super important for the auditory learner. All right, and then we're going to jump down to the read and writing learner. These are our students who love to learn by reading and writing. They enjoy books. Dictionaries are kind of old school, but they still enjoy going online and reading the words. Note taking. These kids really enjoy note taking. And some of them, they don't even enjoy it as much as they perform better when they take notes. And so you want to make sure that if your student is one who needs to read and write, I know, for example, my daughter, we have to let her take notes. She's definitely a read-write learner, and she does much better when she's taking notes. So let's just say you had a student and you weren't sure if they were maybe a mix between auditory and read and write. So maybe you read the directions and they write the directions down. Now you have a combination of what's going on. Or if the teacher is teaching or you're playing a video that they have to watch for that lesson, then they can listen, but they should also be writing at the same time. And again, our kids don't really know their strengths. They don't know how this works for their own good. And so we have to teach it to them. We have to explain to them, about learning styles and let them tell us. Sometimes we can just ask them, at a very basic level, how do you learn best? Do you enjoy when I show you a chart or a graph? Do you enjoy listening to the directions, or do you enjoy note taking? You can ask a simple question as well to get that answer. And so let's look at this kinesthetic. This kinesthetic, learn by doing. You can incorporate body movement. You can do some type of experiment at home. I'll give you an example. My son last week was learning about bioplastic in his science class. Well, did I know what bioplastics were? Not really. So we looked it up. And he had a presentation that he had to create. And so what we did at the end of his presentation, we looked online on how to make bioplastic at home. And so and bioplastics, by the way, it's just a natural way to make plastics that will be more biodegradable in the earth. And so what we did, we had all of the materials at home, which I didn't even realize we had most of it here. And we pulled up instructions on how to make it. And so I encouraged him to make the bioplastic for himself. And he did. And he's a sixth grader, and he did. He made bioplastic. So he figured out how to make plastic. And so that's something that he'll never forget. It's an experience. He has the knowledge of how. And so he asked me, he said, well, who thought of this? How do you know to boil animal fat and heat it up to a certain temperature and then let it dry, add some glycerin, and it turns into plastic? And of course, again, we looked this up on YouTube. We figured it out. But again, he was involved. He was hands-on. He was touching the process. Another example, he had to build a solar oven with a box. So we took a box. It was just a box and some aluminum foil and black paper, and he created a solar oven. These are the kinds of assignments and things that we do at home to help them touch and feel, get involved in the assignment. Let's say your student had an assignment where they had to write a poem or write a play. Maybe they can act out the play. A lot of kids, turn on their video. They love to go online and record, or go on their devices and record. Have them to act out if they were reading a novel or a story. Have them to act out that passage in the story. These are more movement type of assignments that kids who enjoy moving and learning, they just won't learn it as well if they have to sit and listen to me talk to them, or you talk to them. And so we want to make sure that we are incorporating that movement for learning for those kinesthetic learners. And so these are just a few strategies and examples for each of these learning styles for you to think about and understand the strength. And I like to call them strengths because it's important that we recognize all kids have strengths, and we just have to figure out what those strengths look like. And so once you determine that strength, you can begin to associate the strength with the types of assignments and activities that you give to your kid or that your teacher assigns to the students. And I know in this situation, again, it's a little more challenging, but it requires us to be more creative. And that's why we wanted to share this information with you today. We wanted you to be creative with your students, but in being creative, understanding the path of the creativity. Why am I doing it this way? Because we want to make sure that we meet them where their strengths are. Again, they will have mixtures. Some will mix, but there is a dominant learning style that we all can attach ourselves to. And so we want to make sure that we begin learning and teaching according to our child's strengths. Okay, so now that we know a little bit, and again, this is very basic, a little bit of information about the 4 learning styles. Remember, VARK, VARK. We want to now strategize. So you say, okay, Dr. Davis, what do I do with this information? You just gave me this information. What do I do with this? So now I want you to take a moment and we're going to see what strategies work best for your kids, your students. All right. So in strategizing, we have to think a little bit, but I'm going to give you a few strategies, and I want you to pick up to 3 of these simple strategies. These are really that we say simple strategies because I don't want you to try to do too much at one time because it can get overwhelming. So if your student is a visual learner, you want to try one of these. You're going to try viewing more pictures and videos at home. You want to try to have the student draw their notes and pictures. That's a really good one. Some kids draw really well. So they may hear something and they can draw out their notes that they understand it. Just because their notes aren't in letters and words doesn't mean that they don't understand the information or that it's not an appropriate way to do it. I'll have a quick story for that. One day we were at church and I told my kids, I always tell them, I want you during the sermon, I want you to write down at least 5 things that you learned from the sermon. And I do that to try to keep them engaged and to, make sure they're halfway listening at church. And so when my daughter finished, she had written pictures. And she had drew a picture of the whole sermon. And when I first saw it, I thought, well, that's not what I asked you to do. And then I realized that she was listening. She had drawn a picture of the entire sermon that day. She drew, the sermon happened to be about the storm, Jesus, the storm, and the boat. That was just the sermon that day. And she drew the entire picture of what happened during the sermon. She had a boat, she had a storm, she had men in a boat. And I thought that was quite clever for her to take her notes that way. And so, but she understood the story. She knew what happened. She knew what the sermon was about. And so picture notes are really good for visual learners. And they can create a picture collage on something. So they can cut out pictures of a magazine or a newspaper or print out pictures or take pictures. Even if they take pictures, take their own pictures. Those are 3 strategies for visual. So if your kid is a visual learner, you can pick one or up to 3 of these, or if you have others that you want to look up, that would be fine. If your student is an auditory learner, you want to try one of these, an audio book, use a song, find a song. I remember when my kids were learning about prepositional phrases. We found a preposition song on YouTube and it had all the prepositions in it. They learned the song so fast and they knew all of their prepositions. It was amazing. Read aloud to your child. you can read out loud, or they can, if you're busy and you find a story and they can hear it, listen to it, have a daily discussion. This one I highly recommend because it's so easy. And with our busy schedules as parents, some of us are still working, some of us are working from home, and some of us have to still go to work. And so this one's whenever you are available for a sit down, either during dinner time or right before bedtime, have a daily discussion. This one is really simple to incorporate. Take verbal notes. You can have them use a voice recorder. This one is also very effective because they get to speak and they can listen to their notes. This is really good for kids who are auditory learners because they get to speak and talk their notes. Interviews are super fun. They can call friends, family members, and conduct interviews. This is about, maybe something that they're learning or something that some skill that they're working on in class. Or maybe they can, for example, let's just say they were learning about the Civil War. Maybe they could call 3 people and ask questions and do a poll to see who would know the answer, to the information that they're learning. And so conducting interviews even in your household, let them interview the people in the house and go around and ask questions about the information that they're learning in your household. These are really fun and the kids love it. Those who are auditory, they really, really love it. I'll tell you a good one that's not listed here for those kids who are auditory also. Pretend to be a newscaster, and they can broadcast to you all the information that they are supposed to learn in that class or those classes. They love doing that as well. And so, again, if your student is an auditory learner, we would love for you to try one of these. If your student is a reader-writer learner, we want you to get them to start a journal. They can get a notebook or, some fun journal that they have at home, or just an old binder or something, and just start writing. Just write. These kids love to write. And so if you have something and they can journal, I know right now my son, he's keeping a coronavirus journal. And so every day, and it doesn't have to be long, or it can be as long as they want, every day, he's just jotting down, he's journaling this process of being in quarantine. And so, again, and that's a good one for the auditory. If they want to do a voice recorded journal, they can record, or a video journal if they want to record a journal every day of this process in quarantine. But for those who are reader writers, maybe start a journal. They can write a news article, note taking again, and then text. So for those who are readers and writers, text notes is very fun for them. If they want to text their notes to me or to you, or a family member, they can take notes on text and text it. But here's the key with texting, and this is just my own personal rule. If you text, you can't use text verbiage. You have to write out the words when you text your notes. So that's the little kicker there. But try it. Try one of those this coming week. As you plan out your week this weekend, I want you to pick up to 3 of these. And lastly, if your student is kinesthetic, try one of these. I want you to either go online and find a fun experiment for them to do. And again, I know the weeks get really busy. And so if you're going to do an experiment, maybe plan to do it on your day off, when you have time, and you can do it with your kid. But during that week, they can get their materials together, do their research on the experiment. You can give them, because all of that involves their hands-on getting ready for the process. And then maybe on the weekend, you can do the experiment. Take the kid outside and learn with movement. Exercise is always a good way to learn. I mean, if you have kids who are really athletic and like to get out and run, maybe you can, if let's say you have younger kids, you can put your vocabulary words at the end of the driveway and have them run down and go pick up the word, do a flashcard and run and pick up the word and run back and bring it, and they have to tell you what it means when they come back. I mean, these kind of things kids love of all ages. They really enjoy moving around. Or you can create a role play, either maybe something on TikTok or something on, where they're videoing themselves, creating a play about the information or a passage or a story that they've read. And so we want to give you these strategies. Now, again, let's say you say, well, my kids, I think they are visual and kinesthetic. Okay, that's very possible. So now pick one of the visual and one of the kinesthetic and try them in the next, in the coming weeks. Again, you have this weekend, take some time, as we said in lesson 1 or session 1, we want to plan your schedule out. And now you have some strategies to incorporate in that planning process. So we want to make sure that we create the week this weekend. We want to think about how next week looks. We want to talk to our teachers, get our schedules ready. And now we have some strategies that we want to think about. Okay, is my kid visual? Is my kid auditory, reader, writer, or kinesthetic? Remember, VARK, VARK. So we want to just give you these simple strategies to try. And in answering the question, how can I meet my child's needs? Well, this is just one way we wanted to show you. This is the beginning of it. There's a lot more, but we wanted to just start here because this is a basic space to start in when we talk about really providing and meeting our students' needs. Okay? The last thing we're going to talk about before we finish up here is developing positive learning rules at home. And again, this kind of reiterates what we talked about in session 1, but we want to make sure that as we exhibit our attitudes as parents towards the homeschool environment, we want to make sure that it's very positive. As hard as it may be, I know that it's difficult to juggle all of your responsibilities as a parent and juggle school, but you want to exhibit a positive learning attitude towards learning at home. That's very important because the kids will take on our attitudes about learning at home. And guess what? When they go back to school, they still should be learning at home. And so we want to make sure that we start building momentum with this learning at home while we have their attention, because they don't have a choice right now. And so we want to make sure we create new habits for them. We want to monitor time spent on the internet, devices, video games, unless they're using them for academic learning purposes. We want to make sure that they're not spending too much time playing games and exploring things on the internet that they should not be exploring. That is very important. In our first session, we talked about our roles as parents. Well, this definitely falls under what our roles should be. We want to make sure we monitor the time spent and make sure that it's well spent. And you say, well, how can I monitor their time? And I'm supposed to work and I'm supposed to do all these other things. Creating that schedule will definitely help with this, and keeping the kids engaged will definitely help with that as well. And so as we talk about all of the specific things that we have to do for school, we want to make sure that we incorporate family time. This is very important. I'm definitely guilty of being a worker bee. I always want to work. I always want the kids working. And so it is really important that we take care of ourselves and incorporate family time. Watch a movie with your kids, have dinner, take a walk outside. Again, those daily discussions are really good family time to have. Have daily conversations about current events. let one person in the household each day select the topic of discussion for that day. For example, if it's the kids selected one day and maybe the adults selected a different day, the next day, and you guys rotate. But having those daily conversations is definitely helping to develop positive learning rules at home. And lastly, here, we want to create a time for reading each day. Reading is one of the most important skills that a kid can master. They're going to need it in every class. So reading is super important. So as we prepare to kind of close out this school year, we'll talk later about how we go into the summer with this. As we get ready to close out school, we'll look at that in our, upcoming sessions, but we want to make sure that kids are reading every day. So I know one of the rules that I had growing up is, well, you can talk on the phone for as long as you read. And so, my parents were very serious about that. And so we want to make sure that we keep it serious with our kids about reading at home. So these are just a few strategies to develop positive learning rules at home. And as we embark upon our hour time spent today, I want to thank you for joining us for this session. Again, if you have additional questions, you can email us at info@northstaredu.net. We look forward to bringing you more next Friday for session 3. And lastly, if you could, I'm going to paste this link in the chat. If you could provide some feedback for us, for those of you who attended today on this session. I put that link in the chat. If you're calling in and dialing in, it'll also be on your recorded version of this meeting. And if you could take some time and just let us know, give us some feedback. If you have questions, email us, because we do like to get those questions and respond and tailor these sessions to your needs. So again, we really thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking back with you next week. Thank you so much.